The bell above the door chimed softly as Richard Hawthorne stepped into the dimly lit diner, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm apple pie wrapping around him like an old memory. The place was nothing extravagant, just a small old-fashioned eatery tucked away on a quiet street in Charleston, South Carolina. But for the locals, it was a familiar haven, a spot where time seemed to slow, where stories were exchanged over steaming cups of coffee, and where the aroma of cinnamon lingered in the air long after a slice of pie had been served. Richard barely glanced around as he stepped inside, his mind preoccupied as always. The weight of the past 2 years pressed heavily on his shoulders, years spent navigating fatherhood alone after losing his wife in a tragic accident. He had been a man of power and wealth, accustomed to controlling the world around him. But grief had stripped him of that certainty, leaving him with only one purpose: caring for his 10-year-old son Michael. Michael, confined to a wheelchair, followed quietly behind his father, his small hands gripping the armrests as he rolled himself forward. He barely looked up as they made their way to an empty booth near the window. The boy's once bright eyes, the same shade of deep blue as his mother's, had lost their sparkle. Once upon a time, Michael had been a dancer, a child who lived for movement, for rhythm, for the sheer joy of feeling the music in his bones. But since the accident, he had withdrawn into himself, his world shrinking to the limits of his wheelchair. Anna Mitchell noticed them the moment they walked in. She had been working at the diner for years, balancing long shifts to support her daughter, who was away at college. She had seen all sorts of people pass through these doors, but something about the boy's quiet presence tugged at her heart. As she moved between tables, balancing plates of burgers and milkshakes, she caught sight of Michael staring at something across the room. She followed his gaze and saw an elderly couple dancing near the jukebox, a slow, graceful swing, the kind of dance that spoke of decades spent in sync with each other. The woman's silver hair shimmered under the diner's warm lights as her husband twirled her gently. Michael didn't say a word, but his eyes, those quiet, longing eyes, spoke volumes. Anna didn't think. She simply acted. Setting down the tray she was carrying, she stepped into the open space near their table. With a small, playful smile, she tapped her foot lightly against the tiled floor, then swayed to the rhythm of the soft jazz humming from the jukebox. It wasn't a grand performance, just a simple movement, a flick of her wrist, a gentle step that barely lasted a second. But it was enough. Michael's lips parted slightly in surprise. Then, like a whisper of something long forgotten, the corners of his mouth turned up. A small, hesitant smile. Richard, who had been stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, froze mid-motion. His eyes darted to his son, disbelief flickering across his face. He hadn't seen Michael smile, truly smile, since the accident. For a moment, silence stretched between them, fragile yet profound. Anna held Michael's gaze, her own smile never wavering. Then, with a wink, she turned and went back to work as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that neither Richard nor Michael fully understood yet. And in that small, unexpected moment, a door had opened, a door to something Richard had thought was lost forever. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the diner, casting golden streaks across the checkered floor. Anna was wiping down the counter, her mind still lingering on the quiet smile she had seen on Michael's face the night before. She didn't know why it had stayed with her, but something about that fleeting moment, his cautious, almost forgotten joy, had felt important. The bell above the door jingled, and Anna turned, expecting to see one of her regulars. Instead, a sharply dressed man in a tailored suit stepped inside. He didn't belong here. His presence, crisp and deliberate, was in stark contrast to the homey, worn-in feel of the diner. The man's gaze swept the room before settling on her. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was smooth, professional. Anna hesitated, setting down the cloth in her hand. "Yes." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, embossed card. "Mr. Richard Hawthorne requests your presence at his estate this afternoon. He would like to discuss a special opportunity with you." Anna blinked, caught off guard. Richard Hawthorne, the billionaire real estate mogul, the man who had barely spoken a word to her last night. What could he possibly want? She glanced at the card, running her thumb over the raised lettering. The address, neatly printed in elegant script, confirmed what she already knew. This wasn't just a polite invitation. It was a summons. "I think you have the wrong person," she said slowly. "I'm just a waitress." The man didn't flinch. "Mr. Hawthorne believes you are exactly the right person." Anna exhaled, her mind racing. She should say no. She should throw the card away and forget about it. But she didn't. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Tell him I'll be there." Anna had seen wealth before. Charleston was full of grand estates and old money, but nothing quite like this. The Hawthorne estate was a masterpiece of elegance, with towering white columns, manicured gardens, and an iron gate that seemed to whisper of exclusivity. As she stepped out of the car, the weight of the invitation settled on her. What was she even doing here? A butler led her through the vast marble foyer, the silence of the house almost suffocating. Then, she was guided into a study lined with mahogany bookshelves and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a perfectly trimmed lawn. Seated behind a large desk was Richard Hawthorne. He wasn't the same distracted man she had seen at the diner. Now he was composed, purposeful, studying her as if calculating whether she was worth his time. "Miss Mitchell," he greeted, gesturing toward a chair. She sat, keeping her posture straight. "Your assistant said you had a special opportunity?" Richard exhaled, folding his hands. "I'll get straight to the point. Last night, I saw something I hadn't seen in 2 years." His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable weight to it. Michael smiled. "Because of you." Anna's breath hitched slightly, surprised that he had noticed. "I've tried everything, therapy, specialists, anything money can buy, but nothing has reached him. And yet, one moment with you," he shook his head slightly, as if still trying to understand it himself. Anna shifted in her seat. "Mr. Hawthorne, I want you to help him." Richard leaned forward. "Whatever it is that you did, do it again. Get him comfortable with music, movement, make him feel something again." He paused. "I'll pay you $5,000 a month for your time." Anna's pulse quickened. $5,000? That was more than she made in 6 months. But could she really do this? And more importantly, why did she want to say yes? Anna sat frozen in her chair, Richard's offer hanging in the air between them. $5,000 a month. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning, enough to finally pay off her daughter's college tuition, to breathe without constantly worrying about bills stacking up. But it wasn't just about the money. She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her skirt. "Mr. Hawthorne, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not a therapist. I don't have any training in rehabilitation." Richard studied her carefully. That didn't seem to matter last night. Anna let out a small, nervous laugh. Last night was just a moment. A coincidence. Was it? His gaze was steady, unwavering. "You saw something in him. You understood what he needed before I did." Anna exhaled slowly, her mind racing. He wasn't wrong. She had recognized the longing in Michael's eyes because she had once felt it herself. A lifetime ago, she had been a dancer. A good one. She had trained for years, pouring everything into the rhythm, the movement, the joy of losing herself in the music. But life had other plans. Her dreams had slipped away one sacrifice at a time: her mother's illness, the bills, the reality of raising a child alone. Eventually, dancing became nothing more than a memory, a quiet ache she had learned to ignore. And now, here was a boy who had lost something just as precious. She bit her lip. "What if I fail?" Richard leaned back in his chair. "Then you fail." His voice was firm but not unkind. "But what if you don't?" Anna looked away, her chest tightening. She had spent years running from the part of herself that loved to dance. Maybe it was time to stop. Maybe it was time to try. Anna had seen pictures of the Hawthorne estate before, on magazine covers, in glossy real estate brochures, but standing in front of it now, she realized no photograph could truly capture its scale. The mansion loomed before her, its towering white columns and sprawling gardens exuding the kind of old-money elegance that belonged to another world. A world she had never been a part of. As she stepped inside, the grandeur was undeniable: polished marble floors, chandeliers dripping with crystals, walls lined with priceless art. Everything was pristine, meticulously arranged, as if untouched by time. And yet, despite its beauty, the house felt empty. Anna had worked in enough homes of the wealthy to recognize the feeling. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but hollow. The kind of luxury that was meant to impress, not comfort. A butler led her through the long corridors, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor the only thing breaking the heavy stillness. No laughter echoed through the halls. No warmth lingered in the air. She passed a grand piano that looked as though it had never been played, a sitting room too perfect to have ever been used. For all its wealth, the house was missing something vital, something that no amount of money could buy. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum of a life once lived. The moment Anna stepped into the grand sitting room, she felt it, the unspoken judgment lingering in the air. It wasn't hostile, but it was there, heavy and undeniable. The butler, a man in his 60s with a stiff posture and a perfectly pressed uniform, barely concealed his skepticism as he gestured toward a seat. Beside him stood another man, younger but just as formal, Richard's personal assistant, no doubt. Their eyes flicked over her, taking in the simple dress, the worn-out shoes, the hands roughened by years of restaurant work. She wasn't one of them. And they knew it. "Mr. Hawthorne will be with you shortly," the butler said, his voice carefully polite but distant. "May I offer you some refreshments while you wait?" "No thank you," Anna replied, forcing a small smile. The assistant, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Forgive me, Miss Mitchell, but I must admit, I don't quite understand why you're here." His tone was smooth, but there was no mistaking the doubt laced in his words. "Mr. Hawthorne is very particular about who works with Michael. And with all due respect, you're a waitress." Anna held his gaze. "Yes, I am." Neither man said anything, but their expression spoke louder than words. She wasn't meant to be here. And yet, here she was. Michael sat stiffly in his wheelchair, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His father had told him why she was here, to help him dance again. But he knew better. He wasn't a dancer anymore. That part of him had disappeared the day he lost the ability to stand. "I don't want to do this," he muttered, barely looking at Anna. She didn't argue. Didn't tell him he was wrong. Instead, she simply walked over to the record player sitting in the corner of the room. A soft crackle filled the air as she set the needle down, and a smooth jazz melody floated through the space, soft, slow, effortless. Without a word, she closed her eyes and let the rhythm guide her. A simple step. A sway of her hips. A flick of her wrist. It wasn't a performance, just movement, light and easy, as if she were lost in a world of her own. Michael didn't move, didn't say anything. But his fingers, resting on the armrest of his wheelchair, began tapping, small, barely noticeable, but there. Anna saw it, but didn't react. She just kept dancing, letting the music do what words never could. For the first time in 2 years, Michael was listening, not to her, but to something deep inside himself. And he didn't even realize it yet. Richard stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched Anna move to the soft rhythm of the jazz record. Michael sat motionless in his wheelchair, silent, his face carefully blank. But Richard had seen this before: specialists, therapists, well-meaning people who believed they could fix what had been broken. And now, a waitress thought she could do the same. "This is pointless," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the melody. Anna slowed her steps but didn't stop dancing. She turned to him, calm but firm. "Why?" "Because he can't dance." Richard's tone was clipped, as if stating an undeniable fact. He will never walk again. And whatever this is, he gestured toward the record player, toward her, it won't change that. Anna met his gaze without flinching. I'm not trying to make him walk. Richard exhaled sharply, his frustration barely concealed. Then what exactly are you doing? She looked at Michael, at his hands still resting on the armrests, his fingers ever so slightly tapping along to the beat. I'm showing him that he still can. Richard's jaw tightened, his skepticism unwavering. He had spent 2 years trying to protect his son from false hope. And he wasn't about to let some stranger undo that. It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon at the Hawthorne estate. Sunlight streamed through the wide bay windows, casting long golden streaks across the polished floors as Anna gently guided Michael's wheelchair, encouraging him to move with the rhythm of the music. It wasn't a lesson. It wasn't therapy. It was simply an attempt to remind him that movement, in any form, could still be his. Michael's hands gripped the wheels, hesitant at first, but as the melody swelled, he let himself go just a little, rolling forward, then back, finding a rhythm that wasn't forced. Anna clapped along softly, urging him to trust the moment. It was the smallest of victories. And it should have stayed between them. But somewhere in the shadows, a phone camera had been recording. By the time Anna left that evening, the video was already circulating. It had been edited, manipulated in a way that twisted the truth into something ugly. What should have been a quiet private breakthrough was now plastered across social media with sensationalized captions: Waitress exploits disabled child for fame, and billionaire son used as a publicity stunt. Anna saw it when her phone buzzed with dozens of messages. At first, she didn't understand, then she clicked the link. The footage had been cut and rearranged, making it look as though she had forced Michael into an uncomfortable spectacle, laughing while he struggled. The warmth of the moment, the genuine effort, had been stripped away, leaving behind a manufactured scandal. Her stomach twisted. She knew the truth. Michael knew the truth. But would Richard? And more importantly, would he believe her? The silence in Richard's study was suffocating, thick with unspoken fury. The glow from his computer screen cast sharp shadows across his face as he watched the video, again and again, his jaw tightening with every replay. The distorted clips, the misleading captions, the way Anna's laughter had been twisted into something cruel. He slammed his laptop shut. The door creaked open, and Anna stepped inside hesitantly. She had seen the news. She had known this conversation was coming. But nothing could have prepared her for the cold, burning anger in Richard's eyes. What the hell were you thinking? His voice was low, controlled, but it carried a dangerous edge. Anna's heart pounded. Richard, I didn't. He shot up from his chair, shoving a printed article across the desk. Waitress exploits billionaire son for attention. The words practically screamed at her. I trusted you. His voice trembled slightly, but it wasn't with sadness, it was with betrayal. I let you into my home, into my son's life, and this is what you do. Richard, that video isn't real, she pleaded. Someone edited it. He scoffed. Edited? So you're saying someone magically made you look like you were using my son? He shook his head in disgust. I should have known this was about money. I was an idiot to believe you actually cared. Anna felt the blow like a physical hit. She had expected doubt, maybe even anger, but not this. Not the complete and utter erasure of everything she had tried to do for Michael. She took a shaky breath. Look me in the eye and tell me you really think I'd do this. Richard didn't hesitate. I don't have to. The words cut through her like ice. Get out, he said, his voice final. And don't come back. Anna stared at him, searching for even the slightest crack in his anger. But there was nothing. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the long empty hall. The house had never been silent like this before. Not this kind of silence, the heavy, unbearable kind. Richard sat at the edge of his chair in the dimly lit study, his fingers gripping the arms of the seat, his mind still reeling from what had just happened. Anna was gone. He had made sure of that. He had shut the door on her, shut her out of his son's life, because that was the right thing to do. Wasn't it? A soft, muffled sound drifted from the hallway. A sniffle. A stifled sob. Richard turned, his chest tightening. Michael sat curled up in his wheelchair just outside the door, his small shoulders shaking. His head was bowed, his face hidden behind his hands. "Michael," Richard called gently, rising to his feet. The boy didn't respond. "Michael," he tried again, stepping closer. Still nothing. Then, in a voice thick with tears, Michael finally spoke. "Why did you do that?" Richard stopped in his tracks. The pain in his son's voice was sharper than any accusation, deeper than any wound. "Michael." She wasn't lying. Michael's voice cracked. "She was my friend." Richard felt his stomach drop. Michael had spent 2 years shutting out the world. He had withdrawn from everything and everyone, refusing to let anyone in. But Anna had changed that. She had reached him, pulled him out of the darkness in a way Richard never could. And now, he had taken that away. Michael wiped his face with the sleeve of his sweater, but the tears kept coming. "I don't want to talk to you," he whispered. Richard felt a deep, unfamiliar ache spread through his chest. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life? The fire crackled softly in the study's grand fireplace, but Richard barely noticed. He sat at his desk, staring at his untouched glass of bourbon, the weight of Michael's words still pressing heavily on his chest. The boy had refused to speak to him since Anna left, retreating into silence, just like before. The progress, the hope, was slipping away, and Richard didn't know how to stop it. A sharp knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, rubbing his temples. The door opened, and Charles, his longtime butler, stepped inside. There was an unusual hesitation in his movements, as if he were struggling with what he was about to say. "Sir, I believe you need to see this." Charles placed a tablet on the desk and pressed play on a video. Richard tensed. It was the video. The one that had spread like wildfire across social media. The one that had destroyed everything. But something was different. The video continued past the point where it had originally ended. And there, right in front of him, was the truth. Michael in his wheelchair, smiling, laughing even. The joy in his eyes was unmistakable as Anna clapped and encouraged him, her own expression filled with warmth. His heart clenched. This isn't what they showed," Richard murmured, his grip tightening on the desk. "No, sir." "It was cut and twisted," Charles confirmed. His voice was laced with quiet anger. "A former employee leaked it. Someone who had a personal vendetta against your family." Richard exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. He had been so quick to believe the worst, so quick to push Anna away. And in doing so, he had broken his son's heart. He had to fix this. He had to bring her back. Richard sat motionless at his desk, staring at the frozen image of Michael's smile on the tablet screen. The truth was right there, undeniable, unchangeable. He had been wrong. The weight of his mistakes settled deep in his chest, heavier than anything he had felt in years. He had spent his life trusting no one, believing that money and power were the only things that kept betrayal at bay. And in doing so, he had doubted the one person who had done nothing but try to help. Anna hadn't exploited Michael. She hadn't come into their lives for personal gain. She had given his son something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. And he had thrown it away. The study door burst open, and Michael rolled in, his face still streaked with dried tears, but his eyes sharp with defiance. "You saw it, didn't you?" Michael's voice trembled, but there was anger beneath it. "You know now." Richard's throat tightened. "Michael. You believed them." The boy's voice cracked. "You believed strangers over me. Over her. Richard inhaled deeply, his hands clenching into fists on the desk. "I made a mistake." Michael scoffed, shaking his head. "No. You made a choice." The words cut deep because they were true. Richard had spent 2 years protecting his son from pain, from false hope. But in the process, he had become blind to the one thing Michael needed most: to feel something again. Richard exhaled slowly and met his son's gaze. "I have to fix this." Michael didn't say anything. He just turned away, gripping the wheels of his chair. "Then do it," he whispered, before rolling out of the room. And Richard knew, he wouldn't just be fighting for Anna's forgiveness. He'd be fighting to earn back his son's trust. The house was unusually quiet that evening. The kind of quiet that felt heavy, as if the very walls carried the weight of unspoken words and regrets. Richard sat alone in the dimly lit parlor, staring at the old record player tucked into the corner of the room. It had been years since he had touched it. Since she had touched it. His fingers hovered over the worn-out sleeve of a vinyl record, one of his late wife's favorites, an old jazz melody that used to fill their home with warmth. The kind of song she would hum while cooking, the kind she would sway to in the middle of the living room when she thought no one was watching. Without thinking, he placed the record on the turntable and lowered the needle. A soft crackle filled the air, then a slow, soulful tune poured from the speakers. The sound of the past, of better days. Richard leaned back, closing his eyes. He didn't notice the figure in the doorway at first. Michael had rolled into the room silently, his expression unreadable. But something in the music held him there, anchoring him to the moment. Then, for the first time in 2 years, he moved. It wasn't much, just a shift, a slight adjustment. Then his hand slowly lifted, resting gently on the wheel of his chair. His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, following the rhythm of the song. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Then, as if drawn by something deeper, something unspoken, Michael's foot, stiff from disuse, twitched. A small movement. Barely there. But it was real. Richard didn't dare to speak. Didn't dare to move. Because for the first time since the accident, his son wasn't being pushed. He was choosing to dance. The small bell above the diner door chimed softly, cutting through the quiet murmur of late-night conversations. Anna barely looked up from the coffee pot she was refilling. Another long shift, another night of pretending she wasn't thinking about the boy she had lost. But then she saw him. Richard Hawthorne stood just inside the doorway, looking more out of place than ever in his tailored coat and polished shoes. He wasn't the kind of man who belonged in a place like this, not in the warm glow of a diner filled with laughter and the scent of fresh coffee. And yet, here he was. Anna's fingers tightened around the coffee pot. She wasn't sure if she wanted to see him, let alone hear whatever he had come to say. He approached cautiously, hesitating before taking a seat at the counter. "Anna." She raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "Mr. Hawthorne." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I was wrong." Anna didn't respond. "I saw the real video," he continued, his voice quieter this time. "I know what you did for Michael. And I know what I did to you." She swallowed, willing herself not to let the hurt rise to the surface. "What do you want, Richard?" He hesitated for just a moment before answering. "Michael moved last night." Anna's breath caught. "What?" He tapped his foot. On his own. No one told him to. No one made him. Richard looked down, as if gathering the weight of his words. "And it wasn't because of me. It was because of you." Anna stared at him, her heart pounding. "I'm not here to offer you money," Richard said, his voice steady. I need your help." He needs your help. There was no contract this time. No paycheck. No transaction. Just trust. Anna exhaled slowly, looking past him to the night sky beyond the diner's window. She had every reason to say no, but only one reason to say yes. And that reason was waiting for her. The ballroom was alive with warm golden lights and the soft hum of conversation. Guests in elegant attire filled the space, glasses clinking as they whispered about the evening's highlight, the special performance. Richard sat at the front, his hands clasped tightly together. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched the stage, waiting. Then, the music began. A familiar jazz melody drifted through the room, wrapping around the audience like a gentle embrace. And there, rolling onto the stage in his wheelchair, was Michael. The crowd fell into a hush. Anna walked beside him, her expression calm but encouraging. She reached for his hands, and Michael, without hesitation, placed his in hers. Then, slowly, they began to move. It wasn't an elaborate routine, no dramatic lifts, no grand gestures. But it was something more. With Anna's steady guidance, Michael swayed, tapped his foot in time with the music, let himself feel the rhythm. The boy who once believed he would never dance again was now dancing in front of hundreds. The moment stretched, perfect and weightless. And then, as Michael completed a simple spin in his chair, the room erupted in applause. Richard felt the tears before he could stop them. Because at that moment, he knew, Michael was no longer lost. He had found his way back. As the applause filled the grand ballroom, Richard sat frozen in his chair, his breath catching in his throat. He had spent years building walls of logic, of control, of certainty. He had believed in numbers, in contracts, in things that could be bought and measured. But sitting here, watching his son dance, really dance, he realized just how little he had truly understood. Michael had found joy again, not because of therapy or money, but because someone had dared to believe in him when he no longer believed in himself. Anna stood beside Michael on the stage, her eyes shining with pride, but she wasn't the hero of this moment, Michael was. And in a way, Richard realized, so was he. He had once told himself that hope was dangerous, that expecting the impossible only led to disappointment. But what if the impossible had just been something he had never allowed himself to try? Richard wiped a tear from his cheek, letting out a small breathless laugh. Anna hadn't just helped his son. She had helped him. Because for the first time in years, he didn't just see life for what it was. He saw it for what it could be. Life has a way of closing doors we never thought would shut, dreams left behind, people lost, and moments that seem too far gone to reclaim. But sometimes, all it takes is a little faith, a willingness to try, and the courage to open our hearts again. Richard believed that what was broken could never be repaired, that his son's joy was lost forever. Michael believed that dancing, the thing he once loved most, was impossible. And Anna? She simply believed in trying, in meeting people where they were, not where the world expected them to be. This story reminds us that the impossible is often just something we haven't yet given our whole hearts to. Healing doesn't always happen in grand gestures. Sometimes it's found in small steps, a gentle rhythm, a simple act of kindness. For those who have ever felt like it's too late to begin again, remember, hope is never truly lost. No matter our age, our past, or our regrets, life still offers second chances. And sometimes, those chances come from the most unexpected places. All we have to do is believe.